Hey guys, welcome to another episode with me, Shashank Udupa, and today we've got a damn good episode for you guys. After the good feedback that we got from the previous episode, which was the Midcap IT sector, we said, okay, let's do something in the pharma sector as well because the pharma sector has been hot right now. So what we're going to do in this episode is I'm going to talk about the entire pharma sector, the entire pharma industry, what's happening in the pharma industry. I'm going to even teach you some of the important pharmaceutical terms that are there in the market because it might slightly get complicated for a lot of people. And then we're going to look at some mid-cap pharma stocks that, we will look at them from analysis point of view, what they're doing in the market, and we will look at some of the numbers as well. Okay, so it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful episode, okay, in the pharma sector. So let's look at it soon. So now we'll discuss the different type of pharmaceutical terms that are there currently in the market so that, people are not confused of, okay, this term, I don't know what it is. So we'll take one by one, we'll take terms of the pharmaceutical industry and then try to understand what it is. Now, the first term that we've all heard a lot of is something known as API or active pharmaceutical ingredient. Now, this is not very complicated. API basically means every drug, okay, is used to, alleviate some kind of a problem, is used to destroy some kind of a problem. For example, if you look at a painkiller, right? A painkiller is used to reduce pain in the body. So they have an active ingredient that is there inside that tablet or inside that drug which reduces the pain. So that active ingredient solves a particular problem is known as an API. Okay. Now that is also, API is also known as something known as a bulk drug as well. The other term is also called bulk drug. So API or active pharmaceutical ingredient is basically the active ingredient in a particular drug. Got it? Now that is why API, so that it's simple for you guys. Next, we will talk about something known as intermediates. Now what are intermediates? Now, when you form a drug or when you create a drug, there are a lot of chemical reactions that take place at every single point of step. Okay, now when this happens at every single given point of step, an intermediate is formed in the middle to create an API. Okay, so the API, to create one API, there's a lot of steps that needs to take place from a chemical reaction perspective. Now, beach mein there is one intermediate that is formed, and that intermediate is basically known as intermediates, and a lot of companies in the pharma sector create only these things, only intermediates. They don't create the API, they create intermediates for the API itself. So that is what is called intermediate. Now, the third term is known as finished dose formulation or FDF, finished dose formulation. Now, what is finished dose formulation? This is basically the final drug, okay, the final thing that we humans consume, okay, it is the final thing. Now, what does FDF usually consist of? They consist of two things. One, obviously the API, which is the active ingredient to reduce a particular problem, that's why I'm taking it. And the second thing is known as an excipient, okay. An excipient is basically a substance, okay, where the API is stored or formed, whether in solid or liquid form, for us to take it as a consumption. Understood? So these were the three things, very simple stuff, and now we will look at more terms one by one, okay. Now, the other term that is used a lot in the pharmaceutical industry is also known as DMF, or it is otherwise known as drug master file. Now, drug master file is a particular type of file that all API manufacturers need to go and submit to the regulatory bodies. A drug master file is basically a submission to the FDA, which is Food and Drug Administration, that may provide a lot of confidential information, okay, with respect to how the drug was formed, what processes were used, what manufacturing facilities are being used for that, and in storage, how the storage of this drug has also been taken. Basically, all the information about a particular API or the drug has to be given in a drug master file to the FDA so that they can have a look at it. So this is what DMF is all about. Next, we have something again which is very common in the industry, and it is called generic drug. And you might have heard of this generic drug. What is a generic drug? Okay, a generic drug is basically a pharmaceutical drug that contains the same chemical substance as a drug that was originally formed by someone or invented by someone who had patents on it. Okay, like for example, if I had a drug that I formed or I created or I innovated after doing so many years of R&D, I found the next big, drug that I found, right? Now, what I would do is I would go to the office and patent it, and I'll be like, no, if anyone tries to copy this, I can sue them and stuff like that. But a generic drug, once my patent is over and once my patent is gone, a generic drug can come up in the market, copy the exact same thing that I've done, use the exact same substance and stuff like that, and actually come out in the market as a competition to me. Now, obviously, usually the generic drugs will be slightly more cheaper than the patented drugs because I have taken that effort to create this drug, do so much R&D, so my cost of getting this drug was higher, whereas someone else had to just look at my ingredients, break it down and then create something in the same space. So that is known as a generic drug. Now, when we're talking about the same thing, we will also talk about patented and innovator drug, which is what I just spoke about. A drug which is created and branded by a patent, okay, a branded drug which is protected by a patent for a few years. Years depend on each country and the number of years you get the patent for. Now, that is known as a branded drug or a patented drug. Now, the equivalent of this, right, if the patented drug, the patent gets over and a generic drug comes into it with the same substance, same efficacy, same dosage, that is known as the generic drugs. And generic drugs, as I mentioned earlier, will always cost less than the patented drug because obviously we used a lot of resources to do that. Now, another important term that I've seen a lot in the pharma industry is known as CRAMS, okay? Contract research and manufacturing, known as CRAMS. And now this is one of the fastest growing segments in the pharmaceutical industry. Now, in the pharmaceutical and biotechnical industry, what is CRAMS basically? It's contract research and manufacturing, where big companies, okay, outsource research, outsource manufacturing of different kind of intermediates or other kind of products that are required to make a final drug. They usually outsource it, and this is done to companies that have amazing infrastructures, world-class infrastructures, and are also ready to do it at a very cheap price. Now in India, this is booming a lot, where a lot of people are getting different kind of contracts from other people to just create a particular type of substance for them. And obviously in India, we have amazing world-class facilities and they abide by all the rules, and we're obviously cheap. So it's very similar to the IT thing that we saw where, a lot of people outsource it to India. Now what is happening is a lot of pharmaceutical industries around the world are outsourcing it to India as well. So that is known as CRAMS, or contract research and manufacturing. Now another term that we see in the market, actually two type of terms that we see in the market that are very close to each other are known as NDA and ANDA. Okay. Now NDA is basically known as a new drug application, and ANDA is known as abbreviated new drug application. Now what's the difference between the two? Let's understand. New drug application is like an innovator drug, a patented drug, where the NDA will be filed and submitted to the FDA. Okay, the new drug application will be given to the FDA only after the drug manufacturer does 4 stages of clinical trials. So in that 4 stages of clinical trials, all the information should be given to the main FDA, and they will finally look at it and approve whether it's good or bad. So 4 clinical trials have to be done. Okay, 4 stages of clinical trials have to be done. Once that is done, and once the FDA gives approval, only then can the drug manufacturer start marketing his drug across, wherever, right? Wherever he's placed, he can actually start marketing it. Now, the similar fashion, if you look at what ANDA is, which is abbreviated new drug application, this abbreviated new drug application works for generic drugs. Generic drugs are not innovator drugs, they're not patented drugs. So here what happens is the same application is submitted to the FDA, okay, for approval, but this is for the generic segment. Now if you're in the generic segment, means I'm just almost copying someone else's drug with the same dosage, same efficacy, same kind of substance as well. So I do not need to do clinical trials for this. So I skip and bypass the clinical trial. So I save more money over here as well. Now, once I get approved on that application that's saying, okay, your generic drug application of ANDA is approved, only then can I start going and marketing all this in the industry as well. So you understood the difference between two drugs, right? One was a new drug application for innovator drugs, and one is an abbreviated new drug application, which is only for generic drugs. So they don't have any clinical trials or animal trials or human trials, nothing in that element. Okay. Now, in terms of ANDA, there are 4 types of filings that can be done. Now, the entire purpose of an ANDA is I can only do a generic drug if the patent is, it depends on the patent rights of the other company. If the patent rights are strong and is still in effect, it would be very difficult for a generic drug manufacturer to come in that space. So he can file only in 4 types, okay? The first type is, the filing is made when there are no listed patents yet. So imagine I'm an innovator drug and I don't do a patent. A generic drug manufacturer can just come and take the same thing and do it by himself. The second would be if my listed patent has been expired, then the generic drug can apply to that as well. Or if my patent is going to get expired in the next 3 months, then ANDA people can come and start filing an application for that. The fourth para filing, or the fourth side of filing, what they can do is if my patent becomes invalid, okay, or if the patent that I have is not exactly for the generic drug manufacturers. Understood? That's how it is. Now, there is another important term in the industry that is called blockbuster drug. Okay, blockbuster drug. Now, what is a blockbuster drug? A blockbuster drug is basically this extremely popular drug, okay, that gives at least what, $1 billion of sales to a company on an annual basis. At least $1 million coming from one single drug on an annual basis is considered as a blockbuster drug. Now, a blockbuster drug are commonly used to treat simple or generic medical conditions like high BP, cholesterol, diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, and cancer. So the blockbuster drugs actually fall into this segment. Understood? Awesome. Now, we will look at three more types of diseases that are there in this, right? One is called oncology, which you might have heard if you have gone to a hospital or you might have seen a board. Oncology basically deals with the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of cancer. So that goes in the cancer department. So if you have any drug that is coming out that targets oncology, you understand that it is a drug actually targeting cancer or in the cancer research segment. Okay, then we have something known as an acute disease. Now, acute disease is a disease that comes very quickly to someone, okay, but if treated right immediately, the disease will go away. Right? It's like a short-term disease that you get. It will come and affect you obviously very fast, but then if you take a tablet, it can go away very quickly as well. So a lot of people manufacture and produce these acute medicines as well. Now, there's another thing called chronic disease. Okay, now you might have heard of chronic patients, right? He has a chronic condition. Now, what is that? A chronic disease in a human is basically a condition where I have a particular disease that cannot go in the next 2 to 3 months. That's going to be there for a very long period of time. Anything that will stay with me for more than 3 months is known as a chronic disease. And here you will see a lot of things with, say, respect to, say, a heart condition that, I have for a very long period of time. But there are so many diseases that humans have that is a chronic disease. Understood? Now, these are all the different terms that are in the pharmaceutical segment. I hope I was, able to explain it to you guys in a very simple format so you can understand what is happening in the pharmaceutical sector. And tomorrow when you start reading articles about the pharmaceutical sector, you'll be like, oh yes, I know what NDA is. I know when a company submitted ANDA, what it means. I know what oncology is. I know what acute disease is. And mainly I know what API is, which is the most important thing in this industry. Okay. Now in the next segment, we will talk about the Indian pharmaceutical industry as a whole, as an overview. So we'll do that in the next segment. I'll see you guys there. Now in this segment, we're going to talk about the Indian pharma sector as a whole. And we're going to see why it is so important for us to track what is happening in the pharma segment in India, looking at the future growth potentials and what is happening right now. Now, India is the largest producer of generic drugs globally. Okay, we produce apparently 50% of the global demand for various vaccines, 40% of the generic demand to United States, and 25% of all the medicine that goes to UK is produced by India itself. Now, the pharmaceutical exports from India currently stood at around $16.3 billion in FY20. As of November 2020, we're currently at $15.86 billion. So obviously we can understand from this that we are one of the largest exporters of pharmaceutical industry, and massive amount of income that comes in the pharma sector is from exports. Okay. Now, India, this is one of the beautiful facts that I like. India is the only country which has the largest number of US FDA compliant pharma plants. Okay, after US, India is the next largest country that has so many plants that are FDA compliant or US FDA compliant. Yes, and we have more than 262 API manufacturers in India. Okay, India is the source to 60,000 generic drug brands across 60 different therapeutic categories, and we have more than 500 different API manufacturers as well in India. Now, India is the home to 3,000 pharmaceutical companies, and we have a strong network of around 10,500 manufacturing facilities. Let that just seep in, that how big the Indian pharma sector is and how good we are in terms of taking the competition out from other countries, right? Especially when it comes to being US FDA compliant, it is not very easy to have a US FDA compliant plant, and India has one of the largest players in the market with US FDA compliant plants. Now, what makes Indian pharmaceutical sector so unique? You might ask, right? Why are we so good? Now, if you look at the Indian sector, as I told you, right, we have a lot of generic drugs in the market. Now, 70 to 80% of the retail market that is there in India are dominated by generic drugs itself. Okay. Second, local players have enjoyed a dominant position. I'll tell you why. Because a lot of these local players have started quite early before the pharma boom happened, and they put in a lot of money back into their own company to build manufacturing plants. And because of that, they have this dominant position where their supply is a lot. They can actually start producing a lot of different APIs or intermediates and start exporting them and giving it to players in India as well. Now, the third thing why India is again so uniquely positioned to be amazing in the pharma sector is because obviously the prices are low here. right? The prices are low because, in the previous thing we saw that we had so many different pharmaceutical companies in India, and because it is like a cutthroat competition that happens in the pharmaceutical sector, the prices are low, driven by intensified competition. That is why India is so uniquely positioned to be a very favorable player for the pharmaceutical industry, especially for United States, because they export a lot of things to us. And remember, we spoke about one term called CRAMS. That is why CRAMS is also becoming very important in India, because again, we are US FDA compliant. We can do research and manufacturing, contract research and manufacturing at a very low cost and give it back to them. Now, medicine spending in India apparently has grown a lot in the last 5 years, and India is going to be in the top 10 in terms of medical spending that's going to happen in India. Going forward, better growth in the domestic sales is also understood, is also that we can see, because a lot of medical spending is happening in India, and even in the retail markets, a lot of people have started spending more money on chronic problems or chronic diseases such as cardiovascular diseases, anti-diabetes medicines, antidepressants, anti-cancer medicines, and these type of medicines are growing a lot in India is what we're seeing. And in the next 4 to 5 years, we would be one of the top people in medical spending. That means we can understand from this that India is going to be one of the leading drivers of the pharmaceutical industry as well. The Indian pharmaceutical sector is expected to grow by 2025. That means in the next 4 to 5 years, it is expected to grow to $100 billion industry. In the next segment, we will talk about some top mid-cap pharmaceutical companies, okay, by market capitalization, and we will see what each company is doing in their segment and also look at some of the data. Understood? Now, the first company that we're going to look at is called Alembic Pharmaceuticals. I'm pretty sure you guys might have heard of this, but Alembic Pharmaceuticals is a company that deals in the specialty and generic drug manufacturing segment. Okay, so they manufacture generic drugs. Now, the company focuses mainly on marketing, manufacturing generic pharmaceutical drugs across the world. Okay, now Alembic Pharma also operates in the branded formulation business that covers a lot of different therapeutic areas such as dermatology, oncology, and injectable formulations. Now, they have approximately 137 approved ANDAs. Now, we know what ANDAs are, right? It is abbreviated new drug application, which is the generic drugs. They have 137 drugs that are approved under the generic clause. They also have 6 formulation plants and 3 API plants. Okay, so that means if the manufacturing capacity of a company is good, that means they can actually do more and fulfill the demand and supply gap, right? That's what they're doing. Now, Alembic Pharma generates more than 50% of their revenue from the international market. More than 50% of the revenue comes from outside India. And out of that 50%, 40% comes from export to United States. Okay, 40% of the total revenue of that comes from export of United States. The company also exports to other countries like Europe, Australia, and Canada. Alembic Pharma has a presence in both acute as well as chronic diseases and chronic therapies. Acute is basically those short things that happen to you and then you have some tablet and it goes away. And they also are in the chronic section as well. Now let's look at some data with the financial element. Okay. Alembic Pharma currently has a market cap of around 19,000 crores. If you look at their price to earnings ratio, it is somewhere around 17. Now, what I would really like to look at is their operating profit margin, which is around 28.35%. And usually, drug manufacturers have a slightly higher operating profit margin. Their debt to equity ratio is quite low at 0.13, and their 1-year return is around 43%. Now let's look at another company in India which is known as Sanofi India. Now Sanofi India has a parent company called Sanofi, which is not in India, it's a parent company called Sanofi. And Sanofi India is basically engaged in research, development, manufacturing and marketing of pharmaceutical drugs. Now the segment that these guys operate in is known as OTC segment. So they do a lot of drugs in the over-the-counter medication. Over-the-counter means I can go to a medical store, ask for a drug and they will give me that drug over the counter. Now the company basically covers 7 different problems, right? One is cardiovascular, CNS, which is central nervous system, diabetes, internal medicine, oncology, which is in the cancer, thrombosis and vaccines. This is what the 7 different categories that they cater in. The company is also leading in diabetes care with significant market share in insulin business. Okay, so Sanofi is very famous in the insulin business as well. They have 2 manufacturing plants, one in Goa and one in Ankleshwar, Gujarat. And they also have tied up with a lot of third-party independent contractors to help with their manufacturing as well. Now, the company exports its product to more than 59 countries in the world with major influence in Germany, Australia, United Kingdom and Russia. Okay, these are the main markets. Now, you might have heard some of Sanofi's products as well. Now, Sanofi's main Indian products, which is also it is also featured in the top pharmaceutical brands of India. Some of them are Lantus, Combiflam, which most of us have heard, Amaryl, and Allegra, which a lot of people have heard. These are the 4 top products that Sanofi owns that are featured in the top 100 pharmaceutical brands of India. Now again, let's look at some data with respect to Sanofi. Sanofi is currently trading at a market cap of around 17,500 crores. Their P ratio is at 34.48, which is slightly higher than the P ratio of what we saw with Alembic. Their operating profit margin is really good at 24.6%. Their debt to equity ratio is 0.01, which is almost negligible, but their 1-year return is only 1%. Okay, and their sales variance growth in the last 5 years is only 5.75%. Okay, so this is something that you need to look at when you're looking at a product, whether the company is growing or not. If the company is not growing, then you need to think why it's not growing and do more research on that. Again, always do your own research before thinking about any kind of stock. Okay. Now, let's look at another company in the next segment. Now, the next company that we're going to talk about is Glenmark Pharmaceuticals. Now, Glenmark Pharmaceuticals is actively involved in the discovery of new molecules, both in the NCE, which is new chemical entity, and NBE, which is new biological entity. Now, this company is actively involved in manufacturing and marketing of their both in the API segment and in their formulation segment. They usually run and are active in both the semi-regulated and in the regulated market as well. They usually focus a lot on these 3 segments, which is oncology, dermatology, and respiratory. Okay, they have a significant presence in India and other emerging markets as well. And on a total element, right, the company has around 17 manufacturing facilities across US, India, Argentina, and Czech Republic, and Switzerland. So they're obviously there in a lot of places. Now, the company, if you look at from an approvals perspective, let's see, we had Alembic that had 137 ANDAs. Let's look at how much this company has. So Glenmark has around more than 145 approved ANDAs, 50 more ANDAs pending approval, and another 50 more generic drugs are still in development, then which will then go for approval and then get approved, which will drive in a lot of revenue. Okay, so you can see that the pipeline is very strong in this company. It also has 8 brands among the top 300 brands in the Indian market, and also has a lot of strong new generic medicines in the pipeline as well. Now, if you look at the revenue split, approximately 87% comes from formulations and only 9% approximately comes from API business. Okay, again, let's look at some stats. Now, if you look at Glenmark Pharma, their market cap is again 15,780, which is again similar to the first 2 companies we discussed. Their PE ratio compared to the other 2 are slightly lower at 17.43. Their operating profit margin again slightly lower at 18.68. The debt to equity ratio 0.46, not high at all. But if you look at their 1-year return, they've given 62% return in the last 1 year, and their sales growth over the last 5 years or sales variance has been around 10%. Yeah, so this is quite interesting to watch how Glenmark Pharmaceutical plays, because they have a lot of stuff coming up in the pipeline. They have a lot of drugs coming up in the pipeline, and they also have a lot of approvals still pending. So it might actually improve their revenue a lot. Okay, in the next we will look at another company called Natco Pharma. Now, Natco Pharma is a company that is vertically integrated and is a very R&D focused pharmaceutical company. Now, they're engaged in the business of developing and manufacturing and marketing finished dose formulations, which was FDF that we spoke about before, and APIs, which is active pharmaceutical ingredient, right? So they're in these 2 segments and they operate in these 2 segments. The company sells in more than over 40 countries. They have currently 2 API facilities and 6 formulation facilities at this moment. Now, a funny, interesting thing about this is Natco Pharma is currently considered as one of the fastest growing pharmaceutical companies in India right now. Okay, Natco Pharma is also engaged in CRAMS, which is contract manufacturing business, where they take this manufacturing from other companies from different parts of the world, and they do it and then give it back to them. Now, let me show you a detailed data, right? Now, I want to show you what are the different key products that they currently have in the market and what are the key products that are going to become. So I'm just going to show you a picture right now and you will see it. Now, if you look at this, they have around 5 products that they have currently in the market, tapping into different kind of therapeutic segment. If you look at it, some of them are multiple CNS, which is central nervous system. They have antivirals, they have renal disease, cancer in the oncology segment. But more interestingly, what is important to look at is they have around 11 more drugs that are coming into the market, which is in the pipeline, which are going to come into the market, which will thus maybe improve their sales as well. So that is something very key to watch. The company has currently approximately 33 active brands in the market. Now let's look at some data for Natco Pharma as well. Now Natco Pharma is currently operating at a 16,000 market cap by the time we're talking about this right now. The current PE is around 33, okay, which is in line with the first company Alembic Pharma and the second company. Debt to equity ratio is barely anything, it's 0.11. Their operating profit margin is 30, much better than all the peers that we just spoke about. And their 1 year return is 40% because their sales variance in the last 5 years is 18.34%. So that's good. That's good. Okay. Next, we will look at the last company in our segment, which is known as Ajanta Pharmaceuticals. So let's look at that in the next segment. Now, the last company that we're going to discuss right now is Ajanta Pharma. Now, Ajanta Pharma is a specialty pharmaceutical company that is engaged in API and formulations in both in the domestic and in the international market. Now, if you look at the branded generic business, they're in India and in a lot of emerging nations such as Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa as well. Now, in the branded generic segment that they are in the emerging markets especially, they're also in segments like antibiotic, okay, anti-malarial, anti-diabetic, cardiology, gynecology, orthopedic, pediatric, respiratory, and other general health products. Also, the company, what they do is in Africa, under the World Health Organization approved plans, they provide anti-malarial products to African government as well. So they also do it to Indian government bodies also. Now, Ajanta Pharma has around 7 state-of-the-art manufacturing facilities in India and in Mauritius. They have 2 out of that, 2 of the facilities are approved by US FDA also. So the US FDA compliant. They have a massive research and development wing in Mumbai as well for finished formulations and API. Okay. And in the last 9 months of FY21, now look at this is superb. In the last 9 months of FY21, the company has got 42 US FDA approvals and 18 are still pending. Let's look at some of their data as well. Okay. Ajanta Pharma is currently trading at around 15,000 market cap, and all of them, if you've noticed, are trading around the same market cap. Their PE is at 24.6, debt to equity ratio almost negligible, which is at 0.01, but their operating profit margin is at 31.64, which is significantly high, which is good for us. Their 1 year return is 23% and their sales variance in the last 5 years is around 11.92%. So you can have a look at this company as well. So guys, I hope this video gave you a lot of information about the pharmaceutical segment. I hope you learned a lot from this video. Our main job here is to try and educate the people as much as possible. But in the end, you need to do your own research before buying into anything. Okay. I'm here to teach you. I'm here to explain complicated things in a very simple format, and I will do as much as possible to impart knowledge back to you. But I hope the pharmaceutical sector entire industry overview. Now you know what is happening in the pharma sector. You know what these new terminologies in the pharma sector was, and you know some mid-cap companies that might end up becoming large-cap companies in the future. So you know some of them as well. Again, you need to do your own research before getting into anything. So if you like the video and if you like what I've explained, please click on the like button, subscribe, and please share this video so that a lot of people who don't understand the pharmaceutical space can actually start understanding and gain that knowledge. All this is to impart knowledge to you, and I hope we have done that. Okay, so this is a disclaimer. All the stocks shown in this video are purely for educational purposes. Nothing is a recommendation from me or the Grow team for buying or selling. So it's just for educational purposes, and hope you like the video. Thank you guys, and see you soon in another episode.
Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing. Please read the risk disclosure documents carefully before investing in equity shares, derivatives, mutual fund, and or other instruments traded on the stock exchanges.